evening, everybody. It's 6 o'clock here in Alaska. It's whatever time it is wherever you're at. Episode 54. Yeah, 54 of 2 FMA-Nerds Talk About Stuff. I'm going to bring on Doug Raven. I met him actually at Dr. Kelly's Water and Steel Camp a couple of years ago. I also had him as a guest on the Fight House Talks podcast. But we're going to do a standalone episode. So I'm going to reintroduce him to the world as it is today. So I'm going to bring him on and let's get this started. Doug, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Kurt, I'm doing good.
Awesome. So my plan for today is, again, doing a little do a biographical, what you do, who you are, and what you're intending to do for the future. And then we'll just kind of go where we go from there. Sound like a plan?
Okay.
All right, cool. So start us off with a story. Who are you and where you come from?
Gosh. Well, actually Canadian. Grew up in Eastern Canada in a small town, Moncton, New Brunswick. When I say Eastern Canada, most American educated people think, like around Toronto or something. I'm like, no, 1,200 miles east of there, northeast of Maine. So there's a lot more Canada out there in the Atlantic Ocean. So I often have to correct a lot of people on what Eastern Canada means. So I grew up out there, started martial arts actually after I had moved to Calgary, Alberta. After I graduated from high school, did 1 year university, and then went to work and started in Kung Fu back in 1981. So long time ago. And that was called Tiger Claw. It was an eclectic system of Wing Chun and Hung Gar for the two external styles, and Tai Chi and Bagua for internal styles. So it was a real comprehensive blend of Chinese martial arts. And it stuck with me my whole career, my whole life now. I still practice some of the forms I learned. I still practice Tai Chi and Bagua regularly, and it's been incorporated into all the other martial arts that I do and how I teach everything. So it was a real solid base back then.
Oh, awesome. Sorry, continue on.
So yeah, I did that back in Calgary. Then I joined the military. Actually went back to college in Calgary while I was living there. Joined the military, became a lieutenant in the Canadian Army in the medical side of things. Did that for a couple of years, then became a police officer in Toronto. Served with the Metropolitan Toronto Police Force for 8 years. Working uniform, became a defensive tactics instructor. So I got to use my martial arts background in law enforcement. It really helped me get into become a DT instructor, firearms range officer, trained with the SWAT team, a bunch of other stuff like that during my time with Metro Toronto. And then over the last, many years, I've dabbled in martial arts, spent some time in other ones, got a couple of black belts here and there, and just really followed what my heart, what my intuition said, like what I want to learn, how I want to learn it, how it works for me, how it works for my body. I'm not a traditionalist in any way. I don't have a particular style or system. I kind of follow Bruce Lee's philosophy, take what works for me and leave the rest for somebody else. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Russian Sistema, some Filipino stuff. My first Filipino teacher, seeing that we're on an FMA podcast, was Rudy Cosico in Toronto. And he called his system was Cinco de Mano, 5 hands, 5 fingers, I guess. It was a Serrada based. So it was a primarily short stick, 2-stick shorter sticks. So our sticks were like 20 to 22 inches as opposed to some of the 24, 26, 28 ones that you see in some styles. So it was a little bit shorter. We did a lot of butt pummel work, that type of thing. Mostly 2-stick or 1-stick, 1 knife. So that's what I learned, how I was introduced to Filipino martial arts back in Toronto. And then dabbled in it here and there. Like I said, met you at Kelly Warden's. I've done a little bit of the modern Arness stuff. Worked with Chad Bailey a little bit. So yeah, that's it on the Filipino side. Not really particularly deep in there on that side of things. And then BJJ, of course, everyone does some BJJ here and there. Muay Thai, kind of the modern sport martial arts stuff, just to make sure that my striking and grappling and everything were up to par. But most of what I like to do is I just call it modern combatives. And it's taking empty hand, knife, stick, and firearms, modifying it to fit into our modern world, into real life scenarios and situations, and just training that. That's what I've been doing for the last several years as far as the martial arts go. And I've incorporated that into now my full-time job actually at the moment is training security officers in officer safety, defensive tactics, de-escalation, emotional intelligence, all that kind of stuff to make sure that they're safe out there in the real world during their job.
Oh, wow. Let's go back a little bit. Short summary, but as another veteran to one another, thank you for your service. I had a great opportunity to work with the Canadians when I was to the Alaska National Guard. We were teamed up with a armor battalion. So we did annual trainings with them all the time. So I love working with the Canadians. And come to find out, like the majority of my FMA friends, they're from Canada anyway. So like, that's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
everyone who's worked with the Canadians seem to like the Canadians.
Yeah, you guys are so polite.
They're just, they're sorry, didn't mean to. Want a beer?
Yeah. So also tying into law enforcement as to what you're doing now with defensive tactics. Got flakes happening here. Law enforcement obviously is different for wherever you are at, period. But what I've found, like the difference in training mentalities and how it relates to contacts and violence is very interesting based upon the department. Obviously, if you have a small department, you have less violent contacts than expected by per capita. But I am curious as to how that translates, say, your perspective living in America now, especially dealing with law enforcement here in the U.S. for how long you've been doing that, compared to your experience in Canada. How's the difference between the two?
Yeah, I haven't paid a lot of attention to policing in Canada in the last decade. What I have seen is it's become very liberal, for lack of a better word, hands off, more communication, more de-escalation. They want to try to talk everyone to death before doing anything, which actually opens up for potential violence from the suspect because he's got time to think. No one's, there's not as much restricting in his motion because they're giving him all these opportunities to take opportunities to actually do something. It's the same on the West Coast here. I call it the left coast all the time. It's the same on the left coast here in the United States, California, Oregon, Washington. I mean, it's like, oh, did you talk to him right? Did you give him the opportunity? Did you call a social worker? Did you do this? Did you do that? And so it's watered down a lot from the physical components so that it meets the needs of the public and what they think should be happening out there in the real world. And then we see incidents where officers are being ambushed and shot, where they're being attacked, where they're being assaulted sitting in their police vehicles, all of this stuff, because it's really difficult for them to respond appropriately sometimes because they're afraid of getting in trouble. So there was a good example of this on a video, and the video is actually a little bit older, like 10, 12 years old. It's not specifically current, but it showed what's happening. The police officer had gotten in trouble for a use of force. So he had been reprimanded and gone through the disciplinary process and everything. Out on the street again, after his reprimand and whatever happened to him. Does a vehicle stop? And this guy gets out of the vehicle, really aggressive, walking back towards him. Officer says, "Get back to your vehicle, sir." The guy goes back to the vehicle. He stands outside the open driver's door of the truck. It was a pickup truck. Loads rounds into the magazine for his rifle, loads the magazine up, primes the rifle, puts a round in the chamber. The officer told him 9 times to drop the gun. He points the rifle at him, shoots the officer. Only at that point did the officer respond with physical force by shooting back. The end of the video is the officer gurgling to death, lying on his back behind his police car as the suspect walks up over him and shoots him in the head again. That's unacceptable. This mentality of treat everyone this way and do this and do that, and communication skills are superior and everything. Yes, to a point they are. But then you also have to give permission to act, and to act appropriately to save your own life. And I think the incidence of officer involves officers getting shot, officers being killed and everything are on the increase. And part of it is because of that mentality. And part of it is just because of poor training overall.
Oh, I totally agree. There is a statement from another training officer I have spoken to on this podcast about sometimes de-escalation is action, because that window of this could be a threat to everybody where it ends up into a lethal engagement beyond what it could have been controlled is such a strange margin, such a thin margin. But again, if you don't see and you don't know what you're looking at, and also if you don't have that permission based upon your training and experience, you're hamstringed, quite literally. You're fighting with your hands behind your back. So yes, verbal de-escalation, we talk about that as a soft skill, but sometimes that soft skill it has to be a hard skill, but that deciding to turn the switch and turn it into the hard skill, that part, again, policy on departments is a big deal about that, and also just cultural shift. And yeah, especially with the whole defund the police mentality here these past several years, I've seen that shift as well, even my small town of 5,000 people.
Yeah it's unfortunate in some ways. Some of it needed to happen because the communication skills and the de-escalation and the emotional intelligence 20 years ago, that wasn't there. But now it's gone to the opposite side, where now that's the prime. So we need to move back to some level of balance so the officers have that knowledge, but they also have the permission to take action. Kind of the difference between what's happening in Florida and what's happening in the rest of the country. You know, what happened in LA. All right. Don't do anything. Let them do whatever they want. Have your police cars smashed, have riots go on, have them set fire and everything. Florida. All right. You do that, you go to jail. You do this, you go to jail. You do that, you die. So somewhere in there's got to be a balance somewhere.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The culture, the risk averse culture when it comes to law enforcement or just any agency that has to deal with contacts with humans has been a real hazard and danger for everybody, not to mention just for law enforcement in general, because not having the back or not backing them in governmental policy and social policy as to saying, hey, their job is to protect and serve, and we also give them the authority of a badge up to lethality if necessary, but we also give them the authority to go through those critical thinking skills of upholding the law, standing to and doing all these things that is necessary to protect everybody around. But I also think that, like, again, back to training, part of that culture of hamstringing our officers is this issue of like not having the funding to teach them these things. And this is where I find it having law enforcement instructors like yourself who have all this experience is really important. So leading into a question here, as an LEO trainer, have you found it easier to approach a specific agency, or do you work one-on-one with a lot of officers leading into that kind of a contact?
Mostly one-on-one. I haven't done law enforcement training since 2017.
Yeah.
What I'm doing now is with private security.
Okay.
And so I've got the security officers coming through and going out into the field. Okay. And so that industry has changed hugely in the last decade. Especially during COVID and post-COVID. And, you know, where security is often looked down upon as like, oh, the guy who couldn't be a cop, mall cop, all of this wannabe, has been, that type of thing. And the old terminology for security for many, many years, decades, was observe and report. Well, security doesn't observe and report anymore. They do that. And they do emergency response, and they do medical response, and They do active shooter response, and they, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so these companies are doing a complete disservice to themselves and to the officers by not training them properly and putting them out in the field and just saying, don't do anything. Well, the expectations of the clients now is that I'm paying really good money for this. He better do something. He better protect my people. He better protect my apartment complex and my residents who are paying me thousands of dollars in rent every month. That's what he's out there for. Otherwise, I don't need him. And so the discrepancy between what used to be and what has become, there's still a long way to go to bring it back to balance in the private sector as well as in the public sector. And so we have a 40-hour academy, which is nothing, but at least we're giving them a few basic rudimentary skills before they go out on the job. And it's 32 hours in most other companies.
I mean, again, that's better than a weekend seminar, because in certain industries, you can become an instructor, a fully certified instructor, over a weekend seminar. So at least with 40 hours, and especially if it's committed barracks style, like you're there all day, every day for 2 weeks, I mean, you're getting that immersion camp. And the thing that I find beyond that, and it's just with anything in the remedial training, is how much time do these individuals take out of their day to continue on their both their hard skills and their soft skills after they've gotten the certification. Because if you're in a profession of arms, this is your job. So what do they do? And better yet, how do they manage their time to allow for that continuing of education? Because any other field, medical, law, education, you have to do continual education to maintain.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. When I moved to the U.S., I found it interesting. I taught at the New Mexico Law Enforcement Academy in Santa Fe for 3 years, from 2015 to 17, before I moved up here to the Seattle area. And everything is done in blocks. So the whole 16-week academy was broken down into like 1 week or 2 week blocks of information. So for instance, the defensive tactics program was week like 6 and 7, we'll say, or 7 and 8, somewhere in the middle of the academy. And they spent a lot of time on defensive tactics for those 2 weeks. But that was it. In week 12, they didn't continue to do defensive tactics. That was 4 weeks ago. Now we're doing this topic. And there wasn't a lot of integration. There was some integration in high-risk vehicle stops, patrol procedures, DT, and a little bit of firearms, but that was considered separate as well. And the firearms instructors, they were up here. The DT instructors were just, whatever, DT. When I went through the college in Canada, in Ontario, we did 16 weeks of everything. 16 weeks of DT, 16 weeks of firearms, 16 weeks of police vehicle operations. Now, it might have only been 1 or 2 or 3 hours a week, but it was integrated through the entire program. So there was a huge progressive curve that was allowed to happen because it was over that 16 weeks, not just in 1 2 week or 1 week little block. And so when I came to the US and saw this block system down here, I was just like, wow, that's not very efficient. And the officers certainly aren't getting as much out of it as they could.
I mean, part of that, again, is the issues of the local agency culture based upon the funding of said agency, because everything is broken up based upon the region, because we don't have a nationalized police force. The only thing that we have close to that are the federal agencies like the ATF, FBI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for the smaller agencies, say like Alaska, like their primary training academy is based out of Sitka, and they do the block system, as you described, because their funding pool is specific to a population of less than 1 million people. But from a standpoint of pedagogy, or pedagogy, however you can pronounce it, doing the 16-week integrated course structure where you spend a couple hours doing this, then move to another subject, et cetera, and that's your daily schedule, I can definitely see that being a more intentional, solidified approach to education and retention, or uptake and retention of skills, that leads into a better end product as an officer.
Yeah. Yeah, even when I went back and did my DT instructor's course, I did the whole 16 weeks again. So on Monday and Tuesday, so here's our block of training, what we're doing this week. So on Monday and Tuesday, I watched. On Wednesday and Thursday, I co-taught. On Friday, I took the class and I was observed. And I did that for 16 weeks. It wasn't a 40-hour instructor class. Hey, come in, learn some techniques. This is how we do them. This is how it's changed now. Here's your curriculum. Good luck. Go out there and teach.
That was kind of my experience with the Army Combatives program. Once I get to like level 2 and to level 3, is you went to the schoolhouse, you had the very like, you're going through the boot camp approach of this is what we're going to do for a solid 2 weeks, based upon the foundations of level 1, of course. But it was, here's your curriculum, go back and teach your unit. Now, the other freedom that we had with that is when you go back to your unit, yes, there's the standardization of everybody's got to speak the same language for combatives. We have to follow the same SOPs, but you could really specialize as to what your skill sets or talents would be. So like with my unit up here in Alaska, because I'm an FMA guy, I mean, I got to spend a lot of time working edge weapons and close quarters combatives, particular to that field outside of the scope of the typical kind of sport jujitsu, sport combatives approach that you see with certain levels of Army combatives programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot more freedom, but there is that risk of we're going to rubber stamp and standardize and just kick you out the door to see what you can do with it thereafter. And yeah, I wonder with taking the initiative and the training regimen and making sure these departments get up to snuff, because like Seattle area, there's quite a few, there's a large agency there to work with, and you have people like Greg Hanunami, who is a phenomenal instructor in his own right and has also taken his the initiative to make sure that this training is there and available. But that's one guy in a very large pond, so my hat's off for those who take the initiative to go after that. And it sounds like, and I know from you've taken your initiative to doing so.
Yeah. Bellevue has an amazing ongoing training program for their officers with Greg. I mean, he just, yeah. I've watched, I haven't been over personally to their training facility, but I've watched a lot of their videos, and it's like, oh, this is real. This is good. This is, they're going resistance. They're going fist suits and stuff. They're making the officers work for it. And then he goes over and trains at Belton's school, Warrior Strength in Bellevue as well. And so that they've got some good stuff going on, but that's one city out of about 12. So it's like,
and it's interesting because I spent a lot of time in Seattle, obviously, because it's a quick hop for me from coming down from Alaska. But looking at the culture there in Seattle, because it is there on the left coast, it ends up being incredibly liberal and very constrained as to what law enforcement can do, let alone citizen defenders can do to protect themselves and those whom they love. The culture in dealing with use of force is really tricky to navigate, especially with a community that has so much there available, both federal agency plus military that's there, plus combat sports, and not to mention like on the offside, the high level of criminality there. So you would think there would be, there's a high level of training and expertise, but it seems like politically there is such a hamstringing and hand tying behind their back when it comes to dealing with those things in places like Seattle.
Yeah. I again on the private sector side of it a little bit more, but I worked for a contract company for a government agency in Seattle for a month. That's all I could handle, right? Around Christmas and New Year's time. They weren't suspects. They weren't even subjects. They were customers. We didn't take a person to the ground with an armbar. We assisted them to the floor so that we couldn't even restrain them. We placed them in temporary restraining devices. We didn't handcuff them. The terminology, you couldn't say anything. You couldn't do anything. Officers were being attacked and assaulted, and they were just trying to hold their hands up and back up because they were afraid to defend themselves. if officers did defend themselves, they were removed from the contract immediately. I mean, it was like ridiculous. And there were so many restraints. They had to have their duty belts exactly the same as everyone. So you had to have your handcuffs in this place. You had to have your baton in this place. The only variation was if you're right-handed, you can do that. And if you're left-handed, you can do this. But other than that, your equipment had to be in the same place, regardless of how it felt to you, whether it worked for you, whether you had flexibility to get to it, or you had restriction in your movements, and it would have been better over here. I mean, none of those factors came into play at all. It was like, this is what you do, this is how you do it, this is what you say, this is what you don't say. And everyone is a customer, even if they're spitting on you, barfing on your boots, and fighting with you to get on the train again. And it was just like, okay, I can't do this. Sorry, too old.
I mean, yeah, I don't understand. Like, what is the expectation of the level of protection that people are going to get if they are so constrained like that? I mean, the limitations and the overt standardization of one's duty belts. I mean, it's like being a brand new private saying, hey, everybody's going to be dressed because of uniformity, but there's no other good reason why. So yeah, that level of detailed oriented micromanagement that is deeply frustrating. And I can imagine any officer or any security individual who is underneath those constraints definitely have some high levels of frustration.
Yeah.
So with that, when it comes to training regimen, can you describe what is the real difference between executive protection, like the various forms of executive protection? Obviously, we have the top tier, you're being a body man or body woman, protecting your principal, versus site security and all those things. Could you break down the differences between those and some of the considerations about training and also being one of those individuals?
So my understanding of it with a lot of companies, and they're all different, you will have your primary agents. You'll have your agent in charge, your AIC, and then you'll have primary agents who work a principal. Sometimes you've got 2 or 3 teams working a principal. You might have a primary agent that's assigned to the principal that goes everywhere with them. You might have one, and then you've got a different team at the house, and then you've got a different team at the office, and then you have a different travel team. So depending on how big the organization is, you might have multiple teams working the same people. Or you might just have a solo officer going everywhere with this dude, whether he's at work, at home, or on an airplane. So obviously the solo agent needs to have a considerable different levels of training in different things, because he's responsible for residential security if he's at the house and they're at home. He's responsible for travel security, whether it's in the vehicle and he's the driver, or whether they have a professional driver and he's a second agent. That's different as well. And then you've got advance work that needs to be done if they're going out of town or somewhere else, or even going to a restaurant for dinner tonight. Someone needs to go do an advance, a potential advance on the restaurant, find your routes of travel, ins and outs, primary, secondary, tertiary routes in vehicle and on foot. So you've got a whole bunch of different training that is done at different levels. And then you might have residential security people who have no EP training particularly at all, because they're just sitting in the SOC, in the Security Operations Center, watching computers and videos and responding to alarms because the door went off, or they saw something move on a camera, so someone needs to hop on the 4-wheeler and go to the other side of the estate and check that out and see what it was. So the training can be quite diverse.
Yeah, and deeper into that question, or more of a clarification on that question, when it comes to, there's different levels of force, obviously, and the use of force is particular to the municipality. But as a executive protection officer, you guys dance an interesting line between a citizen defender and law enforcement, and you guys have how can I describe this? A different, or you have a specific rule set that you can operate within up to the levels of lethality, but you're still not law enforcement. Can you explain like what I'm trying to muddle through here?
So in Washington State, a EP agent is the same as a security guard. That's it. You got an armed security license. You might have an armed private investigator license, or you might have an armed security guard license. So you are just a civilian. You have no more rights. You have no more anything than any Joe citizen walking around, except that you're employed by some rich person. So if I'm working a detail for a principal and I'm armed and there is a lethal threat against that principal, just like anyone else in any other environment, I can engage lethal threat to suppress lethal threat, okay, or lethal force to suppress lethal threat. If it's not lethal, then hopefully I have some other tools. However, my primary job as an agent working the principal is to get them the hell out of there and not engage an attack unless it's like right in your face, and that's the only thing you can do. Otherwise, it's move this way. And if you're working a team, then it's someone else's responsibility to engage the threat while you're moving the principal to a secure location, whether that be the vehicle or back inside the restaurant or back inside the office building, shutting it down, going into lockdown, or whatever that might be. But an EP agent is no different, at least in Washington, than any other security person. It's the same licensing or a private investigator.
Okay, so it's so it's on the same level of saying doing site security for a hospital, banks, armored truck, that kind of, you're on all on that same level.
As far as licensing,
yeah,
and as far as use of force, so the legislative law in Washington are RCWs, Revised Codes of Washington. RCW 9A.16.020 is our use of force. So in the use of force, I may use force to help or assist a public officer under their guidance. So a police officer is getting his ass kicked, I'll go in and help him out, okay? Especially if they ask. I won't necessarily wait to be asked. I'll just go in and say, do you need my help, sir or ma'am? And they'll say, yes, help me. Boom, all right, you got help, all right? The second one is we may use force to arrest someone who has committed a felony in front of us. So you got to understand what felonies are. You have to know which laws are felonies and what that is, and you must observe it. So we can use force to do that. Subparagraph 3 is we may use force to protect ourselves or anyone else as long as the force is justified and reasonable and necessary. So coming into that terminology all the way back to Supreme Court, SCOTUS, Graham versus Connor for case law, as long as the force is reasonable and necessary given the totality of the circumstances, you may use force to protect yourself and others all the way up to lethal force if necessary. All right? All the same rules. It doesn't matter what the job is, whether you're standing guard at Walmart or you're protecting some ultra high net worth individual.
Which is really helpful because there's, again, as you said, executive protection or just security. There is the stereotype that comes about when you're dealing with people who are not law enforcement but still do the duties of security. And so being able to explain like there's more than just the rent-a-cop. And especially when you have highly skilled practitioners of martial arts, people who came from law enforcement, people who came from the military. I can't tell you, I mean, you know, within your own circle, like the number of high caliber military people that are involved with executive protection, but they all have to start somewhere. I've known a number of law enforcement officers that work at our local hospital and deal with the site security because it's a natural transition from retiring, and they're still maintaining their skill sets. But again, explain to the general audience as to like here, it's more than just the dude eating donuts staring at a television screen. So with that, when it comes to executive protection training, obviously there's a heavy legislative understanding of the laws and everything else. But what are some of the considerations for the schools? Because not every school is the same. Not every school has the same standard. And for somebody who's looking to get into executive protection, what are the things to look for in choosing a good school?
So there's such a huge variety out there. You can do a weekend class. You can do a 1 week. You can do a 9-day, a 12-day, a 1 month, a 3 month, and probably a 6 month out there as well. You can go to Europe or the Middle East and Africa and learn all the high speed, low drag shit you want to learn, multiple rifles pointing in different directions and rolling your Humvee over and, all kinds of stuff. Or you can just go to an American-based one and learn what happens here, which is usually unarmed intervention to protect the principal, mostly from embarrassment, stupidity, and doing something that they're going to put them on the news the next day, like that dude at the concert with his secretary. If he had an EP agent, the agent would not have allowed that to occur.
The memes. I have so many great memes. But yeah, that is a consideration people don't think about is security, personal protection, executive protection is not so much about the external threat. It's that internal threat to themselves by doing stupid shit. But yeah, that's a great example.
Perhaps, sir, you shouldn't pick up this 21-year-old at the bar, but back to the training itself. So there's ESI, EPI, Lasosa and Associates, Select International. There's a guy out of Phoenix. I can't remember the name of his school right now. There's schools all over the country. The problem is, what's their source? It's the same as anything else. So one class, you might have a guy who's former military and worked for DSS in a foreign environment, non-permissive foreign environment during the war. Is that really who you want to learn from if you're driving a Google executive around Seattle? Maybe, but how many of those skills are really going to be transferable? He's used to working in 3 vehicles, 5 to 6 team members, non-permissive environments with rifles and handguns and whatever else and stuff going on, where bombs might be exploding and stuff.
Let alone the logistics that support them.
Right. So I went to one of those classes, and it was actually quite good, but it was completely irrelevant to what I'm going to do 98% of the time. Because most agents, if they go out and work it, you don't have a 5 or 6 man detail, because very few people actually have that. There's only a certain amount of Zuckerbergs and Musks around, and Gates and, some of those guys. And if you're on one of those teams, then you're probably, former spec ops and everything. And your buddy got you the job because you served overseas together. And now you've come in, you've transitioned, and you got your shit together for working CONUS in the United States. But it was like, we're moving in multi-vehicle caravans with multiple officers, with potential threats from different levels. Slow roll, deploy, all this military 3, terminology, explanation and everything. And I was just like, who's ever going to actually use that in the United States? Very few people. And then if you're going in and you're talking like that and everything around your business executive, who's a $30 million a year CEO, he's going to be like, what the hell are these guys doing? And why are they talking like this? And it was, the black suit and the sunglasses and the whole thing. It's since modified. Now guys are just wearing blazers and khaki pants and stuff like that. So they look like they fit in a little bit. But the other myth is, it's men in black. It's like, for who? It's like, why do you guys drive around in 4 black suburban tinted out SUVs if you want to be incognito and you don't want anyone to know who's showing up at the front door? It's like drive a new Lexus LS 500 or something, like something that no one's really going to say except, oh, that's a nice car. So anyway, so you've got that extreme with a lot of military-based type training. And then you have other programs that are much more professional, corporate, US-based, low key. The guy's sitting in the office, the guy's walking downstairs, the vehicle pulls up, and nobody ever even notices that the CEO just left. That's how it should be. Nobody notices that Musk just walked into the building, because he came in the back door through it, with his caravan and stuff. But that's what EP people don't see it. So I provided some level of service, and some of it wasn't very much. It was when I was in law enforcement. But I have provided some level of service for a former king, actually a current king who was a prince at the time, a former president who's now dead, a former vice president, and a couple of governors. So the prince at the time, I was in a kind of a middle perimeter area. So I got close enough to see him. I could have waved and said hi if I had wanted to, but not close, not his inner perimeter. The king, I was standing beside at the stage. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Nice to meet you, Mr. Mandela. That's who it was. The governors, just vehicles are pulling up at the state capitol complex, make sure there's a clear walkway and stuff, and that their team can move in and out, and that there's a place for the vehicle to pull up and there's no one parked there. That kind of stuff, but getting to see the teams moving and moving around. Then the vice president we worked with for 3 days while I was visiting here in Seattle. Moved him from hotel to conference and out to dinner and stuff like that. Nobody would have known that we were even there. And that's how it should be. Not these, I can tell that's a 6 SEAL team members just walked into the lower lobby of the building, and that's what they still look like too.
I mean, it's the whole, we want to not present soft targets. We want to have a good force projection and profiling. But what a way to put a target on your back when you got everybody in their Oakleys and high end tights and all these things. Because again, you're doing the absolute opposite of the quiet professional in the background, the person who's all the eyes but is not being seen. I think the mystique comes around is, again, with the GWAT. I mean, 20 years of combat, there has been a lot of people who've seen combat and bring back those skills, and executive protection of assets and principles is a big part of that. Yes. But everybody's got such a hard on, excuse my phrase here, but everybody's got such a fucking hard on for the special operations community of this is what it's supposed to be. And therefore, you see in the way that people going to these executive protection schools, they want to go to basically a special operations summer camp type school and get a certification. Yeah. But in reality, as you're saying, that's not what you're going to be doing. So no. It's odd.
You're picking up the kid from school, taking them to music practice, dropping them off at home, turning them over to the residential security guy who's just sitting at the gate in a security operations center, watching cameras and screens, making sure no one climbs over somewhere where they're not supposed to be, and making sure it's locked down at night. My current company does an extreme high net worth individual, and we do the residential security for them. It is fucking boring. You walk around the campus, or you sit in front of 20 computer screens watching, 48 different cameras all day. That's it.
Yeah, I did a small stint of site security for a number of banks before I did armed security for trucks before I went on active duty. And man, that was some very boring work. I mean, yes, the force projection of being in uniform with badge and being the visual deterrent, sure, great, but that was a very boring job. And yeah. It did definitely live up to the mentality of the rent-a-cop look. But again, the importance of that kind of work is, it's for the site, it's for the protection of the people there. But the real question is, what would one do to actually intercede in that situation? Is it actually called for? Am I legally permissible to do so or justified to engage? So those are all those odd things that at a young 21-year-old going at a minimum wage job as a security guard, yeah, I didn't think that far because they didn't know. So, and this is where conversations like this is really helpful, is to explain for people who want to get into executive protection or into security work, so they know what to look out for and what is actually something that actually will happen. Because as martial artists, especially Filipino martial artists, we deal with sharp, pointy objects, of course. And so that kind of falls into the wheelhouse of somebody who deals with protection and use of force. But the application of that, the actual usage of that is so small. And again, somebody who has a martial arts background, as many of us do in the military and etc., they find themselves within a series of employment that, yeah, the martial arts side is a small part of it, but in reality is how much does it actually translate to what you actually do?
It's not the translation of the physical skills. It's the translation of the mindset of not getting excited, not allowing fear to take over, being able to control your breathing and your adrenaline response because you're confident, you're competent, and you're capable. That's the big difference. That's where it becomes important. That's why I stress every officer who comes through the academy, train. Now, go find a gym near where you live that you'll actually go to, and go 2 or 3 times a week and work on yourself and work on your skill development. Not specifically for your skill development, because you actually might have to use your skills, but for the mindset, so that you won't have to use your skills, because you won't unnecessarily escalate a situation, because you'll be confident in your communication skills and de-escalating. You'll read it. You'll recognize all the pre-indicators. You'll move to a safe distance. You'll take cover. You'll leave the area. You'll call in backup. You'll do, all of those myriad of things that are on the avoidance side before something ever even happens. But if you don't have the competence and the confidence in yourself to recognize those things, to recognize that, yeah, if it does go to shit right now, I can handle it, then the fear comes in, the competence goes away, and now you're a mess. That's when you fail.
So with that, when it comes to training individuals, especially at your academy, what are some of the things that you train, or better yet, what is your pedagogy and approach to taking a brand new officer and running them through the gambit to make sure that they have the skills, soft and physical, to do the job?
Okay, so today, Monday, a lot of administrative stuff in the morning, getting through that, writing their state tests so they can get licensed. All that has to be done as well. This afternoon was defensive tactics and use of force. So we talked about use of force. We present the continuum that is used in law enforcement here in Washington, just so they can have a visual on, when is something appropriate, when is it not appropriate, and how does that fit within a legal structure. Then I have them look up RCWs, look up use of force RCW, look up theft, look up assault, know what the law says, not what your instructor Doug is telling you. Because if you're in court testifying for yourself and say, well, and my instructor Doug said this, they're going to, who the fuck is Doug? Like they don't care who Doug is and what Doug said last year in academy. Why did you do this right now in this set of circumstances? And where's your legal justification? So we go through that. And then we get into distancing, minimum 6 foot distance, 8 to 10 preferable, body blading, hands at center core of body, some movement drills. And then we take them through 2 skill sets that are pretty rudimentary, but they teach some really good concepts and principles about movement. One is defending against a straight attack. So we use a straight punch. So they're looking at a linear type attack coming at them and how to get offline, how to cut the angle, how to get close to the person so that they can counterattack and neutralize if necessary, how they can disengage from the person, create distance, and maybe go to a primary or secondary tool like pepper spray or a taser if they have those available to them. And then we work the second skill set is off a haymaker punch. So the preferred punch of all drunk, stupid 25-year-old idiots at bars. How do you defend against that? Well, instead of getting offline from a linear attack and then working from the side of the person, you go up the middle, cut the circle in half, and blast in on them. So here's what you can do for this. Here's some counter strikes once you get inside. Here's a disengagement and de-escalation position, so you can, again, create distance, go to a secondary tool, right? And then maintain distance and verbals. So that was all today. Tomorrow, we're going to do more administrative stuff about how they do patrols, report writing, and stuff like that. So they're going to learn how to write reports tomorrow. True official security officer legal documents that can be read from anyone from, a coworker to your supervisor, to a manager, to the client, to the district attorney, to the judge, to the Supreme Court of the United States, if it gets that far. So how do you write good documentation? And then we'll have them go through scenarios and stuff to learn that. Then tomorrow we'll spend more time on defensive tactics, do more on the two skill sets, linear and circular, then escapes from grabs and holds and counterattacks. Wednesday, OC spray, or handcuffing. Wednesday we'll do handcuffing. Compliant cuffing. If it's a good class, we get to move into some non-compliant and then combative cuffing after you've done a takedown, looking how to put cuffs on someone on the ground that you now have control of, but from a very different position. Okay, so that's on Wednesday. Thursday, CPR, AED, Narcan, fentanyl, all the shit that's out there in the streets of Seattle and all the big cities around here. Okay, how to deal with that, how to save your own life, how to save someone else's life. Then Thursday afternoon is pepper spray. What is it? How do you use it? Movement drills, weapon retention, all that kind of stuff with pepper spray. Then Friday, we wrap it up with scenario-based training, more reports, investigations, and wrapping up and rounding out all of the DT that they've been doing for the week.
Sweet. And this, how long is this course that you provide?
40 hours.
40 hours? Okay. So with every cycle, you guys are getting, for doing this for as long as you've been doing, you guys have a pretty solid curriculum, and also with the real world experience. Do your officers come back for remedial training as well after they've gone through the fundamental course? So the remedial, we don't have remedial training. Our advanced training is taser. So that's a one-day class that I teach. Then there's a one-day class for Baton, and my boss actually teaches that because he's a Remy Pracis guy, so he likes to do all his Remy stuff. So he teaches a Baton class. I'm trying to fit in along with the taser class because it really doesn't take a whole day to do a taser operator class. So I'm fitting in takedowns and arrest control tactics combative. So they're getting that because they have to know that after they've tased someone and incapacitated them, how do they move in and restrain the person? Or how do they disengage, depending on the circumstances. So that comes into the taser class. And then we have a 2-day firearms program. So they spend 8 hours off a range, fundamentals, drawing, maintenance, firearms usage, all the rules and everything. And then they go to a range for the day and then shoot their qual shoot as well. So that's kind of our advanced training. So they can work. If you have a brand new officer coming in off the street with no experience, they've got to wait for 90 shifts. They need to complete 90 shifts, prove themselves, be out in the field, be on time, be in uniform, do their reports, not argue with supervisors, all that kind of stuff, not get caught sleeping. And then they can request going through and becoming an armed guard. If you've got someone coming in with military law enforcement and everything, we try to bump them up and get them in maybe after the first 30 days. Get them into these classes, get them armed, get them out there working, because the pay bump's the pay bump is $6 an hour from $24 to $30 an hour just working armed. So it's a nice little pay raise to get that training and to get out there and work armed sites. That's really interesting. Again, the level of detail of your guys' training, again, it's a bell curve depending on the schools. And to utilize some of the the stereotypes out there. The schooling that you guys are providing is going above and beyond the stereotype, because there's the very much of like, here's a badge, here's a book, go observe and report. And then you have the far side. You have the wonderful documentary led by Gerard Butler called Olympus Has Fallen, or that's where everybody thinks that's where an EP guy is going to be. So the happy medium of what you guys are doing and the actual practicality of this is what an EP person's actually doing. Yeah, that's quite insightful, because for a lot of people out there who hear about executive protection, but like, ooh, what is executive protection? It's not law enforcement, but there's like security. Like, I don't know what it is, but like the level of detail what you guys are explaining is, yeah, it's quite full in totality when it comes to education. Because I look at the aspect of just from the military standpoint, from like a basic infantry standpoint, yeah, it's profession of arms, but there's so much to like all the things that an individual's doing in their particular set of military standards and requirements. So they're going to get peppered of information. They're going to be a jack of all trades but master of none. But with EP work, you guys are doing all the things, but you're also very targeted and focused, because you don't have some of those external issues of like force on force with people with artillery. And this is where I find the issues with like military guys coming back from combat going into the EP world, because if they're this same story and conversation of what is the transferability of skills from combat and special operations to like walking a Google exec around.
Right. Almost nothing.
Yeah.
Except your confidence, your competence, and your abilities. And then you have to transition all of that combat oriented stuff, your heightened state of hypervigilance, bring yourself back down, get your adrenaline in check. No one's trying to kill you today. And let's just get the guy moving from location A to location B without, someone crashing into his car. Let's make sure we don't get caught in traffic. Let's make sure that the Wi-Fi in the vehicle is working so he can work on his computer while we're transporting him from one location to another. Let's make sure that his extra shirt is in the back. So if he spills something on it at lunch, we got a shirt and a tie and a jacket for him in the trunk. Let's make sure that my shirt and tie and jacket are in the trunk too if I spill something on my shirt. Let's make, it's a completely different, level of what you're looking at and who you're working with. So what I explained to you is basic security guard work, unarmed and armed. If you're talking EP work, you're going to add another week or 2 or 3. You're going to look at driving skills. You're going to look at a whole different set of communication and movement skills. How do you move a principal with no threat involved? How do you move a principal through a threat? How do you respond? How do you cover them? What are your primary, secondary, and tertiary routes of travel from one location to another? How do you do advances? What information do you need to collect on the advance to know that when you're moving to a different location, might just be a restaurant for lunch, that someone's already been to the location, they know exactly where to pull up, where to park, where they're going to be sitting, who the maitre d' is, who the chef is, who the main waiter is, who's going to be waiting on your client. All of that kind of stuff is all looked at and all considered. Where's your escape route if something happened? Where are you going to stand or sit so you can observe the client, but no one's going to notice that you're there, because you need to be invisible. It's not like in the movies where there's, I guess it can be sometimes you got your diamond formation and the principal's in the middle and you got 6 guys in black suits moving through the lobby of the hotel. You don't see that very often.
Yeah, they got the earpiece and the thing talking to their arm. Yeah.
Right. It's like, what's the greatest indicator of someone, a big ear thing sticking out here and someone going like this and talking at their wrist, it's like, so from your security basic training, which is what I'm talking about, what we do every week, then you've got to add in another couple of weeks of specialized training. Different communication skills, understanding relationships. You're working closely with this person every single day. They have to trust you and you have to trust them. When you say move and you grab them by the belt and you start shoving them this way, they don't go like, what are you doing to me? They recognize that you're probably saving their life right now, and they just move with you. That requires a relationship of trust and understanding and communication. Most security people don't have that, so that's another skill that you have to learn. Most of our security personnel, they have no idea who the client is, and they'll never make contact with the client, and they're not allowed to contact the client. They have no permission to contact the client directly.
That's interesting.
If the client needs to be contacted for something, they go through their supervisor. Depending on who the client is, that might get escalated to the director of operations to make that phone call. Because this is potentially a billionaire client. We don't want a security guard calling a client.
You don't want the private to go talk to the general.
Exactly.
What I'm hearing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So he goes through the chain of command, and then it might be the owner of the company who calls this client, because he has a lot of we have clients that he deals with directly, and he is the only person that they deal with, so that's completely different in EP work. In EP work, you're standing beside, walking beside, in front of, and behind the client all day long, and you know them intimately. You know their wife's first name, you know their kids' names, you know where they live, you know what color their bedroom is potentially, depending on what your role is. You know all that kind of stuff. So it's a higher echelon of person with a different mentality and social and personal character qualities, I guess, that would be functional in EP compared to regular security working at an apartment complex or an office building or something like that. Your C-suite, to get into the C-suite, you have to be C-suite caliber.
Oh. So here's another question going back a little bit. So how often or how likely is it that the team actually trains with the principal as to, like, in case of this scenario, this is the TTP. In case of this scenario, we do that. And they actually go through the fire drill, the react to contact drill with their team. Is that a common thing, or is that, I would think it's specific to client, but.
Yeah, I would hope that it happens more than not. I mean, you're going to have a primary agent probably in most teams that's responsible for direct communication with the client. I would hope that the communication and relationship is good enough that they do that, but not necessarily, it's like, does the president know the name of all the social Secret Service guys on his detail?
Probably not. I mean, probably especially not. After the last incident on the campaign trail. So.
He knows two, maybe, or something like that. That would be an interesting question. And I don't know, because I don't work a lot of EP details. I got Microsoft up the street from me. Amazon's across the way. Meta's a few blocks beyond that. There's teams that work there and work those all the time with all those corporate CEOs. I bet every one of them is quite different.
Yeah, I can imagine, because again, you're dealing with individual companies and they have their own SOPs and TTPs. So, but it's just a general question I run into for people who do any sort of security minded job or particular profession of arms, or even from the individual personal protection skill sets. How do we train our families to do the things necessary in a contact situation? Because again, we do fire drills when we were in grade school, but how often as citizen defenders of our families do we run them through these drills to react to contact and all that kind of thing?
My girlfriend, who's sitting right over there, is going to love that question, because she came up with the idea because we were doing some training and she was just there watching. And she said, "Oh, use me. And so I said, okay, so we're going to do a movement drill. So we have a thread over here, and I'm going to move you from this location to this location. Now I might do this. I might do this. I might grab you here. I might duck you in underneath my arm and just move you and stuff." So I demonstrated them all on her. And she says, "That was so powerful. That was awesome. We need to do couples nights."
Yes.
We can do it at a restaurant or a nice location with tables and chairs and invite couples in and have a glass of wine. And then shit happens. And honey, you need to protect me. It's going to make the women feel safer. It's going to give the guys confidence. They're going to feel like, all right, I'm a warrior, and probably get some rewards for that later on when they get home. And, but it'll help the relationship. And so we mentioned this to a couple of people and they're like, yeah, that sounds like fun. You guys should put something together.
Did you guys end up doing that? Because that sounds awesome.
Not yet. This was just in the last month this came up.
Yeah, I can see that actually. I mean, there is definitely a call for that because, again, with all Krav Maga background, there's a lot of like, we're going to protect the family. We're going to screen while mom takes the kids and gets to a car and videotapes and everything. Mm-hmm. But like, that's just one scenario. That's one SOP. And having this other dynamic of a team building exercise with the couple, like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I like that idea.
Yeah, we thought it was pretty cool. And if we can, set it up in a nicer environment and, mm-hmm. Even have snacks and food or something, like make it, okay, you're out for dinner. This is what happens. And then we go outside and say, okay, you're at the mall. This is what happens. And there was a great video not long ago. It was an outdoor shooting. And the mom, how's it being videotaped? I think the mom is on her phone, but she's her phone is looking at herself. So she's carrying her phone with her, may have been on with 911 or something like that. And you can hear all the screaming and stuff in the background. And she's saying, this way, kids, move down the street. See that yellow sign, move there. And I'm like, damn, good job, Mom. Like she knew what she was doing. And it sounded like she was getting two or more kids out of danger and down the street to cover in a safe place.
I mean, that's good parenting. I remember when I was a kid, because my dad, when he was in the Air Force, did a lot of stuff dealing with the drug war, dealing with counter narcotics, going after guys in the jungle during the 90s. And so we had an EP team attached to us for a little while. We was gone doing trips. But yeah, I remember some of this training of like, this is what we're going to do in case of this situation, this scenario. These are the people that we're going to follow. Here's the commands. Here's the protocol of screening. And it's like at 7, 8 years old, it's like, why are we doing this? Now at 40 and doing this stuff professionally, it's like, I should have paid more attention to it. But then again, like, how can one do that at 8 years old? So trying to translate that to my kids and my wife, for that matter, it's like, yeah, we don't have the context of I'm doing the cool guy stuff in the jungle, chasing after the cartels, because that's not my life. Yeah, thank God. But the point being is like translating that type of skill set to a civilian aspect is just as, again, as Dr. Kelly says, as a citizen defender, how do I translate that to, again, my wife and my kids when the need arises? And this is where it comes to like scenario training. And I know you're really big about scenario training. So what are some of the considerations of what is good scenario training and what's shit?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to a little story that kind of leads into this. My former partner and I, when we first moved up here to Seattle, we get on a bus in downtown Bellevue. Downtown Bellevue is clean, it's modern, it's new. Microsoft paid for most of it. It's a really nice little core city. So we get on the bus, it's also clean and nice. We go across the bridges, across Mercer Island into Seattle. We get off at Pioneer Square. Holy shit. What world did we just transport to? It smelled like urine and feces. There were people yelling and screaming. There was a group of homeless people right in front of us, and a fight broke out. And I just grabbed her by the arm. I said, move, 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 move. And I brought this hand up over here. I grabbed her by the arm and shoved her that way. We moved off about 20 yards down the sidewalk, and then we turned around and watched the spectacle from safety. But it was just like, just being able to do those things, to recognize where's the threat, where's the safe, where's cover, where's concealment, what weapons are available, where can we freely move to and not be interfered with by someone else who's standing there because they don't know what to do. Do we need to bring other people with us? Right. So you got an active shooter scenario. Hey, active shooter in a mall. Watch the videos. People just standing in the middle of the hallways going like, oh my goodness, what's that? That's very noisy. I've never heard anything like that before, and then some guy walks around a corner and puts a bullet in their head. Meanwhile, you've got other people who are yelling and screaming and not doing much else, who are just kind of standing next to a coat rack, still fully visible, so they get shot too. Then the other people, they're through the store and out the back door already in the parking lot before the guy gets anywhere close to them. So that's the scenario you have to run. Where are you? Where is cover? Where's concealment? Where's your escape route? Can you engage? Do you have training? Are you armed? Okay, then you're going to run different scenarios. If you're going to engage because you're armed and you're going to be a citizen protector, do you just get yourself out, or do you grab everyone else around you who you can? Do you have kids with you? Do you have the wife with you? Is the dog there? Who do you need to get out of there and through that door to a safe place? Are you then going to call police? Did you get a description? Can you see the shooter? Can you, provide further information for their response? So running through those things in your mind, in your imagination, will set you up for success if something like that really happens in the future, rather than you standing there going like, oh, what am I supposed to do now? And never having thought about it before, because you won't process anything.
Yeah. Again, it's that the gamification, the what if game. And again, the soft skills that we find that aren't sexy, so to speak, in the very physical aspect of self-defense and personal protection. We love to punch, we love to kick things, we love to shoot stuff, we love to doing the very physical, aggressive stuff. But when it comes to the soft skills, they tend to be reserved for the remedial training, here's the beginning slide. But reality is, those are all the stuff that's actually the more important stuff, because you win more fights by seeing and recognizing what danger is, and having war game through in your free time, instead of doing in the immediate, in the crisis situation, as to what do I do in this situation immediately. And this is where, again, the pre-gaming aspect of the what if, and this is where I find with certain training methodologies is based upon the mindset of particular to that individual. So like, again, the wargaming aspect, obviously, for a soldier is that they're particularly to that level of contact, that level of force. Law enforcement, they have a certain mindset that they have to deal with as to dealing with scenario training and what they're going to be presented with. Same with EP work, security work, and just as a citizen. And I'm curious as to the way people look at these different hats and different approaches to training scenarios and how they war game through that. Because I don't know if you remember from when I presented at Water and Steel a couple of years ago, this ideal of criminal creativity. How does a criminal, a violent criminal, predator, or somebody who's just going to fuck with you just because they can, how are they going to approach the situation so they can accomplish the task that they want to do, such as like the knockout game, or in my case, the razor game. Because that's the way people prepare for that, depending upon their law enforcement, executive protection, security, citizen defender. They have a different process to go through that what if.
Yeah. So the citizen, what are the crime stats? What's the likelihood that something is going to happen? If something is going to happen, where is it going to happen? So in EP work, the place that you're going to get attacked most likely is in the vehicle, or around the vehicle, or during transportation. Because when you're in the house, behind the walls, or in the office building, it's very hard to penetrate. But it's easy to get to someone in a vehicle. So most attacks like that happen in and around a vehicle, whether it's moving or stationary, pulling up, disembarking, going in and out, because from the vehicle to the entrance, there's this big space and everything. That's where most attacks happen. Okay, so in EP, they train for that. Civilian, there's an 80-20 break. What you train is the reverse of that. Okay, so 80% is avoidance. 80% is observation skills. 80% is vigilance, being aware of who's around you, what they're doing, what they're saying, what they're dressed like, how they're behaving, all that kind of stuff. Where your escape routes are. Why are you even there? Okay, avoiding situations. Don't be in downtown Seattle at 3 o'clock in the morning walking around a homeless shelter, place. Or don't be a white dude in a black neighborhood at 2 a.m. It's pretty simple stuff. If your friends go out and get drunk and get in fights, don't go out with them. We can avoid almost everything. And then every once in a while, shit happens no matter what we do. Okay? But we can avoid pretty much everything. If you are an adult in the United States and you get into a fight or you get robbed or something, you probably did something stupid. Because you went to the wrong place at the wrong time and you didn't pay attention to your environment and you didn't get out of there soon enough. Now, that's not always the case, but in a lot of situations it is. Like, well, why were you there at that time of night by yourself? Oh, well, I was going, it's like, well, don't do that again, And then sometimes just shit happens no matter what you do. So the 80% is the avoidance, the de-escalation, the communication skills, the observation skills, all that kind of stuff. The 20% is the physical skills fighting. Okay. So when it does go to shit, you actually can maybe do something to minimize damage. Right. And I word that specifically as I'm thinking about it. Because if you're attacked, you're going to get hurt unless you are far superior, a lot bigger, faster, stronger. Just accept that something bad is going to happen and your skills and your abilities are to minimize that potential, right? And hopefully they're the ones that get hurt more than you do, unless you are highly trained, right? The flip side is, so the 80% is the avoidance and all the soft skills. The 20% is the hard skills. The 80% is easy to train though, so you only spend 20% of your time on that. You spend 80% training the 20% of the hard skills because those are the things that are hard to learn, right? So if you've got that formula, don't forget your 80% soft skills though, even though you only practice it 20% of the time. And as you become more proficient in observing your surroundings, on being vigilant all the time, on recognizing people's body language and cues, and don't be in this area, don't be in that area and stuff, it kind of moves into the background and it's always switched on and it's always there. So you don't really have to pay a whole lot of attention to it unless something particular piques your interest, and then you focus in on what is that an immediate threat? And then you respond. The physical training is what you need to spend more time on, but is what you will probably never use. But you want to be good at it so that if you do need it, it's there for you.
Yeah. I've joked about this, but it's very true. I have won thousands of engagements, fights, whatever you want to call it, because I saw it first. I saw the danger or the risk. I saw like the potentiality of me being a problem. And by being present enough and recognizing who I am, where I'm at, and all these things, I was able to avoid a potentially violent altercation. And again, that's not super secret ninja shit. It's just like experience to be able to see and recognize certain things. But that didn't require me to do a lot of physical training. It's just being observant. So
when I was in law enforcement, I worked on the street in Toronto for 8 years. And, I went back and they said, okay, what happened? What did I actually do? 8 years wasn't particularly long, but it was long because it was in Toronto. And there was just a post today. Pullman Police Department over here where the university is which one's Pullman? Anyway, University Town. They responded to 66 calls over the weekend. I'm like, what a joke. Our department responded to 5,000 calls a day. I would respond to 30 calls myself a day. Okay. So 8 years at 30 calls a day is 45 years of Pullman PD experience. So when I looked at it that way, I was like, no, I had a good role. I did a lot in 8 years. And so I backtracked a little bit and I said, okay, how many arrests did I make? I said, 2, 3, 4 a week. So let's just say 2. So I made 2 arrests every week. It's 100 a year, 800 arrests. In 800 arrests, I was never in a fight, and I never had to use any real levels of force that could have caused injury because I was tactically sound. I communicated well with my partner if there was a partner involved. We controlled the environment, and we executed everything and did it fast. And we just got it done. So I was never injured. I never hurt anyone, and I arrested 800 people. Sometimes those were just compliant arrests, turn around, put your hands behind your back and stuff, but just as many were not.
Wow, that the numbers on that's incredible. Because you go to some of these other places like with the same amount of contacts, and these guys are beat up at emotionally, physically, spiritually, all the things because of the levels of contact and violence that they've had to deal with. So yeah, my hat's off to you and congratulations on that.
Yeah. Well, part of it was the martial arts background. I had the confidence. I had the competence. I wasn't adrenalized and in fear going into these confrontations. Sometimes I got my adrenaline dump after, and I'm standing there shaking when he's in cuffs in the back of the car, hopping up and down, letting it all get out of my system, but not going into them. So I was confident in my abilities. The younger guys who were getting into fights, getting injured, doing all that shit, they weren't. They didn't have the background. I was also in and out of 2 years in the military at that point. So I also had that level of, that extra training of discipline and stuff. And so all that really helped me,
Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, the military, just professions of arms, definitely targets a certain age demographic where they're physically strong and not so prefrontally cortex developed, we'll say. I'll call it young and dumb as one who enlisted at 19. So yeah. So there's a certain demographic that they target. But again, there's a point, what is it, by 30 that the brain is fully developed for a man or something like that. If it ever gets fully developed.
25-ish, 20, yeah.
If it ever gets fully developed because of life and other choices.
Right.
So the thing that I'm finding is like you got these young guys who want to get in and get in the fight and get in the scrap because they're physically capable, they're eager, and they just want to do the things because that's what they signed up to do. But yeah, the longevity of these guys were the higher levels of trauma as a result of all that contact and the unnecessarily willingness to go engage physically when they could have dealt with it in a less combative approach. Like it's kind of like one of those things of like, you're physically capable, you want to go do the thing, therefore you go do the thing, but at the long risk of life, limb injury, and all these things. Versus the idea of an older officer, again, the gray beard upon the field, who has the temperament, has the discipline, has the experience because they've gone through these things, and has a lexicon of knowledge and wisdom to draw from it to understand, like, here's what actually could happen in the scenario because they've been there, done that. And like I said, build up that confidence, the capability, the resilience, and that discipline having been there. But my point being, there's this interesting concept about military and law enforcement having people come in at an older age, say like after 25, because you see it in special operations in the military that typically, unless you're in the 18 X-ray program, but typically they want people who've been in the military for a while and have got some maturity, understand how the things go, and they have that higher level capability because their brain is hopefully fully developed at that point. There is a strong argument, again, of having people enlist or getting involved in these professions of arms as an older person because of the maturity. What can you say to that long-winded preamble?
Well, based on my little observations of the spec ops community, aren't most of the people who go in and go through selection and stuff, aren't they already sergeants pretty much? They've already been in for 5, 6, 8 years, something like that, got promoted a couple of times. Now they've proven themselves. Now they're being considered for higher level positions or responsibilities. Yeah. I became a cop at 25. So right there, the 21-year-old, 21's minimum age anyway, so at least you don't get your 17, 18, 19-year-olds like the military does. But your 21-year-old who's still living at home and mom still does his laundry is not going to deal in a violent domestic situation very well because he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He's not going to deal with violent conflict very well because he's never been in one, especially the kids growing up today. So I went in at 25. At that point, 7 years of martial arts, 2 years of regular military, transferred to reserves when I went into law enforcement. Already, had moved away out of the house at 18. Could cook for myself, could do my own laundry, had been in a relationship and out of a relationship already. So I was already mature. And so I think that made a huge difference in my ability to do the job compared to the guys who were 3 or 4 years younger who had none of that life experience, even though at that time it was still a very minimal life experience. It was more than a lot of them. They were getting in fights and having problems and chasing people and doing shit all the time. So, I want to go back to the part about the injuries.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm 62. I have no surgeries.
Congratulations, young man.
Thank you. I have no injuries. I've had injuries through the years, like, oh, my shoulder's sore for a month, or my knee's bugging me for 6 months, maybe a little bit, that kind of stuff. But I look at guys who, I've got a couple particularly in my mind. They're 5 and 7 years younger than I am. So they're in their 50s now too, getting up there a little bit as well. But they've had multiple surgeries, both of them. Both rotator cuffs, a knee, a hip, a spinal fusion, and all this shit, because they beat the shit out of themselves in their martial arts training. They weren't even in the military or law enforcement. It was just a hobby. And they're a fucking mess because they thought, oh, you got to train hard, got to do this, got to do that, and everything. I'm like, why are you guys beating yourself up? When are you ever going to use that level of violence against anybody else other than your training partners? And why do you need to injure yourself to acquire skills? I just never understood that mentality. Maybe I was fortunate. Maybe it was just my mindset. I don't know what it was, but I can get on the mat. And it was kind of funny. A couple of weeks ago, had some of the security officers coming through, and 3 or 4 of them were former military. And we started doing some DT stuff. And it was a class where I was able to start adding some more things in because they were experienced and picking stuff up. And by the end of the week, they're like, holy shit, man. Like, how old are you again? And how do you do that? And it's like, no, I'm not going to mess with you. And, and I'm just saying that just because if you take care of yourself and you train to a capacity that allows you to develop, but also avoid injury and doing stupid things, you're going to last a lot longer. It's that 75% rule. You never go more than 75%. You don't run full out sprints if you want to go farther. You keep a reserve. You don't go in, these UFC fighters, every once in a while they will, but most guys, they don't go in and go 100% in the first round. They feel it out. Then they up it to about 50. Then they up it to 75 for a little bit. Then they slow it back down again. Then they up it. Then they explode 100% and try to get that armbar. Then they miss it. Then they brought it back down to 50 again. And that, but it's people who get the mentality that the harder you train, the better you are. To a point, yes, there's some validity to that. And then you just get fucking injured and now you can't train anymore for 6 months or a year.
Yeah, and I find that is one, it's for one, individual accountability, but 2, it's also the community that you surround yourself with and like the training mindset of that community. Because when you're around a bunch of young bucks who just want to get in there and scrap, well, they're going to up the ante as soon as you bump fists. So there's that. And also if you have a coach who just this is the way they've done it, and it's been the cycle of where we just go hard all the time, that's also the problem. I being on the other end of like all that you described, like my body's thrashed. So because I've had multiple surgeries, multiple things broken, ripped, and torn. I'm dealing with CTE from TBIs, and like I have all the things. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, and it's because I've been doing a lot of stupid shit, plus Army and combat arms, plus professional combat sports. Like, I did not take care of my body, and I'm paying for it now. So, yeah, I'm on that other end.
And how old are you?
40 in November.
Oh, wait till you're my age.
Yeah. So I'm nursing. So both my knees are buggy, both my shoulders are buggy. I've had 4 surgeries on my ankle. I've had both tibulas, had multiple stress fractures across. I've had a fibula break. They were going to take my leg from the knee down at one point. I've had multiple rib fractures, hand fractures, skull fractures, been shot, been stabbed. Like, I've done some stupid shit in my life, and that's informed a certain thing about my life. But like, yeah, paying for it now and paying for it 10, 20 years down the line is just like, yeah, things don't move really well. So I have to adapt and overcome and like mitigate by not doing certain things. Like, I'm not going to roll hard. I'm not going to spar, for one, because my neurologist flat out said, you got a ticking time bomb, so just stop. So, but yeah, again, and this is coming from, like, I started really young and kept on going versus somebody who comes in later in life and who has that maturity and less injury. And so they have that longevity. So,
yeah. And injuries are going to happen. I've had broken ribs, dislocated ribs, broken foot, things like that too. That's just shit happens. I'm talking about the guys who just train so hard that they just beat their body up for no reason other than just to train harder and cause their own injuries. I've had my elbow swollen up like this, different things. But I was able to also control it enough that I didn't injure myself for no reason, I guess. And sometimes, it's out of control. I mean, you tear a rotator cuff. But if you go back in there in 3 months after you just had surgery and do it again, well, now you're being stupid.
Or in the case of like jujitsu, like, I make it a point maybe once in a month that I will get on the mat with one of these 18-year-old scary ass wrestlers who are a switch and not a dial. I mean, I'll do it maybe once a month, and then I'll be reminded, like, that's fucking stupid. I'm not going to do that again. But
yeah. So if anyone watches this, watches this in the future or gets this far along in our now 90 minutes or something and stuff, take care of yourself. Think about the long term. Getting injured just so you can train harder today is not worth the ramifications and the consequences of 6 months, 6 years, or 60 years down the road if it's not absolutely necessary. I did the law enforcement thing. I trained for the SWAT team. I was a DT instructor for a long time. I've done it professionally, and I've still been able to maintain my health. So injuries, yeah. Inadvertent things, yeah. Fall down, twist something, sprain something, yeah. But also monitor yourself.
while we're at that, actually, because we're an hour and a half into this, I'm really terrible about marketing, but let's put up a couple of things here. Let's put up your social media so people can come find this, and I'll just make individual clips off of that anyway. So let me pull, where do I want to share screen? Here we go. Instagram. Here is your Instagram page. I don't know how active you are on there, but here we are.
Not very at the moment, and we're actually in transition.
Okay.
So, this academy training job I've had for 15 months now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stopped teaching regular martial arts classes, civilian ones, because this is a full-time job.
Yeah.
And so I've been out of the martial arts classes for a year now.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, how about your website? Is this still active or?
Nope. Oh. So of course I miss it. So I'm getting back into it. So right now the Instagram page is still up. The Facebook page is still up. Those are still good, but you're just going to see a different name come into them pretty soon.
Gotcha.
So it's going to change from Eastside Combatives to Enhanced Training Solutions 360.
Okay.
Because I'm really wanting to get into more on the civilian market at the corporate and company side, and doing corporate trainings for employees, expand my base a little bit, get out of the trying to get one student at a time in a martial arts class, and come at it from a different place. So instead of being localized with Eastside Combatives, serving Eastside Seattle, come up with this name of Enhanced Training Solutions 360, full spectrum training, so that we can expand. There's no limitations. We can work security training, civilian training, corporate training, and we're global. The new logo has the globe behind the ETS 360, so that we don't have any restrictions anymore. And we can expand and we can grow and we can do whatever we want with that name, and not having to look at, oh, well, does this fit here and does that fit there, and East Side what, and stuff like that.
So is this going to be, so with your academy, this is a physical location, correct?
So the Security Academy is a physical location, and I'm employed by a security company.
Okay.
So all of that training is done through SSNW, Security Services Northwest. So I run their training academy. So that's not my business.
Okay.
I'm an employee. They pay me well, so I work for them.
Nice.
The ETS 360 is my business. That's the new name coming out, which used to be Eastside Combatives for several years now. So we've got a new website being designed. We're expanding the programs, going back into civilian training. I'm actually going down to half-time at the Security Academy so that I can spend more time on creating this new business. I live around Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, Netflix, Costco, REI. I'd be silly not to tackle this market. So I've decided to finally do it.
Well, that's awesome. So it sounds like that's more of a seminar structure that can plug and play based upon where you're needed, but will you have the intention of opening up a physical location as well?
I'm hoping to. That's actually the hardest to run because it costs the most money and is the hardest to market.
Yep.
So doing the corporate training, there's no upfront cost. Well, there's all your marketing, advertising, website, and everything, but there's no physical structure cost because you go to them. And there's no working and trying to, get 1 and 2 and 3 students at a time.
Well, you still got overhead to pay for.
You have 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 people that you're in their conference room for doing presentations to. And you get paid for that at that level.
The civilian seminar route is, I can definitely see the allurement. I mean, I did a little bit of that here in Alaska, but I was also running a commercial school, and that was definitely, as a professional martial artist, that is definitely one of those, like, what does I want to say? Those benchmarks to cross, but boy, was that a painful benchmark. So, and I can imagine the similar story for anybody who has the daunting issue of overhead and liability of a physical location. So doing the seminar route, that definitely seems like the way to go.
Yeah. I'd still like to get back into a regular combatives class for adults, maybe twice a week, and then just rent a space at a yoga studio or an MMA gym or something like that who says, come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can have the mats at such and such a time, that type of thing. That's totally doable. That was my Eastside Combatives. I rented from a CrossFit gym and just ran my classes out of there. So my overhead was just the time that I used. It wasn't this $4,000 rent up front at the beginning of every month, whether I had any students or not. That's, I just, no, not my thing.
Yeah, I totally feel you on that, especially on the other end. I'm actually back to that point of where I'm operating out of a space and I don't have the overhead costs. I have a pretty cool deal where I'm teaching classes there for the school, but I'm able to teach what I'm teaching for the school. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So, like I said, we've been at this for an hour and 40 minutes. I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have anything particular that you want to go expound upon? As much as this is an FMA show, like I said at the beginning, we really didn't talk about FMA all that much. So, I mean, we can dive into that if you want, or whatever you want to go into. Yeah.
No, I'm going to cut it short here, or cut it off here in a moment. Let's see what other. That's been a wide range of topics. I guess just follow you, to the listeners. don't get caught up in the politics of styles and systems and having to do this and having to do that. If a person tells you that this is the way and the only way, they're full of shit. Dump them now. All right. As fast as you can. Right. There are 8 billion people on this planet. Only 1% of us are martial artists. So that's still a pretty big number. That's how many ways there are of doing martial arts. Find something that you enjoy. If you like a system or you like a style and it fits your mentality, it fits your emotions, it fits your body, then stick with it. That's great. But don't feel like you have to. You see people in martial arts and it's like, why are you still doing this? Oh, well, because, this is my grandmaster and I have loyalty. Like, why? I mean, if that's part of your personality, you want to be loyal to someone, okay, go ahead and do that. But think outside the box. Don't just do that because of a single reason. All right. People talk about lineage. Yeah, it's important where you get your stuff from, but it's more important what you do with the stuff that you got from them and what you're going to move forward with, progress, and evolve, rather than just going back and doing it the same way over and over again. Do I have a lineage with one person or one line? No, I've probably got 40, and could I go back and talk about, Richard Morris out of Britain, Alan Saï from France, Mike LaMonica from Ohio, and a whole bunch of other people that you've never heard of before? Sure. Does it mean anything? No. Okay. Because I've assimilated into what I do. Does that mean I'm a grand master or an Asuki or anything? No, not at all. None of that matters either. It just means that I do what works for me, what's evolved into my way of expressing myself. And if I'm teaching someone, I try to teach them so that they do the same thing. Let's see if this works for you. No, that doesn't really work for you. Okay, let's try this a different way. What are you more comfortable in? Oh, you want to grapple more. You're better at wrestling. You want to be in contact. Okay, then let's look at adapting this initial response to meet your personality and your body type and your mindset. Okay? Oh, you're a striker and you like to kick. All right, I got some kicking drills for you. Let's work on your kicking speed, timing, and distance and everything. Let's work on target acquisition. So find somebody who can help you with what it is that you really want to be good at, not just have to learn a whole bunch of shit to get to one or two things out of that. All right? I remember going to a Kempo school, and I really liked the Kempo guys, but I had no interest in learning Kempo because it was 10 posters up on the board for 10 different ranks all the way up to black belt with 10 or 12 things you had to memorize on each one of those 10 pieces of paper. So to get your white belt, you had to memorize 10 techniques. Not only did you have to memorize the technique, but you had to remember what it's called. And there are all kinds of strange, weird names. You had to memorize the exact attack and do the exact attack the same way each time and do the exact defense the same way each time. That's how you get your rank. And then I would watch these guys sparring, or I would spar with them, and none of them did anything that was up on the wall because it was impractical and unusable in a real life situation. So they just did it for rote memorization and gray matter development. And when the instructor, I trained there for a couple of years with them just because I liked them. And he says, why don't you do our Kempo system and stuff? I said, dude, see that stuff up on the wall? I can't remember all that shit. I'm too old. I was in my 40s at this time. I'm too old to remember all that shit. It takes up too much gray matter. And so I just continued to train and have fun. So do you. Make your own thing. Follow who you want to do, but do it for the right reasons, not just because you think you have to or something, or I want this lineage or whatever other bullshit reasons are out there in the martial arts world.
Doug, that is
I'm done.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. No, what a great way to end it, because again, the conclusion that I find with people who know, it's the same thing. Like, do you make it work for you and make it your own and embrace it, and you like what you like. So hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
For instance, I've done BJJ a couple of times over my martial arts career for about 6 months at a time. I don't continue to do it, and I don't like it.
That's fair.
But that's okay. We have grappling, we have ground response, and I know what BJJ guys are trying to do to me. So I come up with solutions to that rather than learning BJJ to just do BJJ. Have a reason for everything that you do as well.
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole that I'm dealing with now, because I've solidly been training BJJ for about a year now. I mean, I've been involved with BJJ for about a decade, but I haven't been part of an academy solidly like I have this past year. And like the habits that I'm having to break, especially from the military combative side of BJJ, plus the weapons and tools side of grappling. Like, I'm holding positions because I want to acquire a tool. It's like, that's not good BJJ necessarily. I'm not learning BJJ at that point. I'm still doing the stuff that I like to do for what I'm doing, but it's still not learning BJJ. So like breaking that and switching modes, that takes some doing.
Yeah. Well, and then you're going to have to, after you do that for a while, then you're going to have to come back and put it back together again in your way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I keep reaching for a firearm or a knife whenever we're rolling, especially when I hold like knee shield or hanging out in side control. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sean Sean from Water and Steel and stuff from Belton
Sean
School.
Chewy? Yeah.
So I did BJJ with Sean last year for a while. That was one of my several month stints.
Nice.
And so, Sean wrapped me up in pretzels and tied me up and everything and put a bow on me,
Yeah, as one does.
They said, okay, let's put a knife in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
He died.
Yeah, as we do.
Well, it was like, and he was like, shit, okay, like now what? So it really depends what you want to get out of your training, how you train and what you put into it, because it's very different. So you got to know what your goals are. If you want to go into BJJ tournaments, awesome. Go in, get some rank and win some trophies. But if you want to know it for survival, then throw a knife in, throw a gun in, have 3 guys trying to stomp on your head. Most of your arm locks, chokeouts, and movements and shit aren't going to work.
That is correct. Yes.
Right? So then you have to adapt and say, okay, well, what can I take from this? What can I take from that? How can I put this together? Now I have something that might work in this environment and situation. Yeah.
Yep. And again, adapting it to yours. And yeah, with this conversation, it definitely seems, and I know because I've touched hands with you, that you've adapted and made it work for you. And I'm glad and grateful that you continue doing that and being a leader in that regard, to give people, or at least introduce them, that they have the permission to make it their own and make shit work for them. So yeah, congratulations on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to be here and stuff. Man, that was almost 2 hours and it felt like it went like that.
Yeah, well, again, I'm more than happy to have you back on, because you have such a breadth of knowledge and experience that I would love to pick your brain again. Plus, I just generally like you. And it's a bummer I'm going to miss you this year at Water and Steel, but I'm down in Washington enough as it is that I'll more than likely be able to come and hang out with you at some point.
Yeah, do that. Yeah. So you're going to what on the 16th, 17th, 18th, or that weekend?
So I'm going to Water and Steel. For those who don't know, here's the business side of the house. Let me pop this up here. Let's do a share screen. So Dr. Kelly Warden, our wonderful leader in NSI, is doing his 45th Water and Steel training camp there at Gig Harbor, August 15th through the 17th. Also, this is going to be his last hoorah for this camp, because, like I said, he's been doing this for 45 years. Registration is still open. And the best way I can describe what Water and Steel is, it is a conference of like train the trainer, like the elite train the trainer, because like the brain trust that's there is incredible. The wealth of knowledge and experience and openness is incredible. And yeah, that's actually where I met you, for everybody to know. So yeah. Good company.
And on that weekend, I'm going to a very different seminar. That's why we're not going to see each other.
Bummer.
So for those of you who may have heard of Systema, the Russian martial arts stuff, a lot of people think it's hokey pokey and bullshit because they don't understand it at depth. They just see videos on YouTube and stuff that do look kind of hokey and pokey, I will admit. But when you actually study it, you get to understand a very different aspect of it. So Vladimir Vasilyev, who is one of the people who came out of the former Soviet Union back in the early 90s and moved to Toronto when I was a police officer up there, started his Systema school, and I got to meet him back then. Didn't train with him, but have trained through him and through his students over the years. Is coming to Seattle that same weekend, unfortunately. So I'm going to see Vladimir that weekend because I've never really trained with him very extensively, but I really enjoy Systema and what it offers. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll miss you this year, but like I said, I'll hopefully run into you soon again because I'm down there often enough. I would love to actually just have a conversation about Systema because I have a little understanding of it, but again, it's misrepresented in the community. So after that training, I would love to have you come back later on and we can talk about what is Systema and how it is applied to the world of what we do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, that'll be great because I've trained with Martin Wheeler, who's another big Systema guy personally, Quan Lee, who's a Seattle-based guy. So there's going to be a lot of stuff going on that weekend. I'm sure it will open my eyes to new understandings of things. But I've also been in and around it for about 15 years in different ways. So I've incorporated a lot of the principles into what I do in my martial arts. Even though I might be working stick and doing some Sinawali stuff, I'm doing it with a different perspective and mindset that came from Systema's principles. You know, doing takedowns, doing striking. Striking is very different. But there's some good videos out there about striking out there. And like Jesse Enkamp has done a couple of Systema videos now on his YouTube channel. So there's another guy who does a bunch like that, like Jesse stuff. He went to Vladimir and got hit by him and like, oh shit, this is for real kind of stuff. So when you get it for real, it's like, oh, it looks a little weird because it's different than most of the other, but that shit hurts too.
Yeah. I mean, if it works, it works.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Well, cool. Well, we'll put that in the pit. In the calendar for later on. And again, thank you for the gift of your time to steal a phrase from our brother, Jeff Johnsgard. I'm looking forward to chatting with you and meeting with you again in the future. Best of luck and success in everything that you do. And yeah, definitely stay in touch, my friend.
All right. Well, thank you. All back at you as well.
All right. I'm going to drop you down and do our outro. And if you want, I'll just drop you down. I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Okay.
All right, bye. All right, guys. That was 2 hours of awesome. I am going to do a short outro because I'm going to edit this anyways. So, goodbye. Have a nice day.